In July 2017, three college graduates hiking in the Grand Canyon vanished without a trace. No bodies, no equipment, nothing. 7 years later, one of them stumbled out of the wilderness, barely recognizable. His skin burned black as leather, his filthy, tattered clothes hanging from his emaciated frame, his body covered in ritual scars. He spoke of the Canyon Keepers, a secret society living in hidden caves beneath America's most famous national park. This isn't fiction. This is the documented case of Garrett Moss, Jake Holloway, and Meredith Quinn. Hit subscribe now if you want to discover what really lurks in the depths of our national parks, because what happened to these hikers will make you question everything you thought you knew about the wilderness. When Garrett Moss collapsed outside the Bright Angel Lodge on October 15, 2024, Park Ranger Michelle Torres thought she was seeing a ghost. The man stumbling across the South Rim parking lot barely looked human. His skin was scorched by years of desert sun. His hair hung in matted ropes down to his waist. His feet were so calloused they resembled stone. But it wasn't his dramatically changed appearance that made Torres's blood run cold. It was his eyes. They darted constantly toward the canyon depths, as if something down there was calling him back. Garrett Moss was supposed to be dead. Along with his roommates Jake Holloway and Meredith Quinn, he had vanished into the Grand Canyon's remote eastern section in June 2017, following their graduation from Arizona State University. What was meant to be a week-long celebration had become one of the park's most extensive search operations ever mounted. 250 personnel, 18 days, helicopters, dogs, thermal imaging, swiftwater rescue teams scouring 60 square miles of unforgiving terrain. They found nothing. Not a single piece of equipment, not one footprint beyond the 6th mile marker, not even a thread of clothing caught on the canyon's razor-sharp rock. 3 experienced hikers, well-equipped and prepared, had simply vanished as if the canyon had swallowed them whole. For 7 years, their families lived with questions that had no answers. Were they at the bottom of the Colorado River? Had they fallen from some impossible-to-reach cliff face? Had the desert heat claimed them in some hidden side canyon where their bodies would never be found? The official explanation was simple. Tragic accident. The canyon claims an average of 12 lives every year. Bodies are often never recovered. Case closed. But when Garrett stumbled out of that wilderness after 7 years, speaking in whispers about the Canyon Keepers, everything changed. What he revealed about those missing years would force investigators to confront a terrifying possibility, that some of America's most beautiful places hide secrets darker than anyone ever imagined. To understand what happened in those canyon depths, you need to know who these 3 friends really were. Garrett Moss wasn't your typical college graduate. At 26, he was older than most classmates, having worked construction for 3 years before pursuing his degree in outdoor recreation. He was the kind of person who read topographic maps for fun and spent weekends exploring remote desert trails that most people would never attempt alone. When Garrett planned a trip, he planned it right. Backup routes, emergency protocols, detailed weather analysis. His friends joked that he was paranoid, but they trusted him completely. Jake Holloway brought a different kind of expertise. As a mechanical engineering graduate, Jake approached everything with methodical precision. While Garrett knew the wilderness, Jake understood equipment. He researched gear specifications, calculated weight distributions, and insisted on redundant safety systems. At 25, Jake had already completed solo hikes in Utah's slot canyons and Colorado's 14ers. He wasn't reckless, he was calculated. Then there was Meredith Quinn, the heart of their group. Her anthropology degree had given her a deep fascination with Native American history, particularly the ancient peoples who had called the Southwest home for thousands of years. At 24, she combined academic knowledge with genuine respect for indigenous cultures. Meredith wasn't just interested in pretty views. She wanted to understand the deeper significance of the places they visited. These weren't inexperienced college kids looking for Instagram photos. They were serious outdoor enthusiasts who had been planning this trip for months. June 8, 2017, started like any other adventure for the trio. They loaded Jake's 2016 Ford Explorer in the pre-dawn darkness of Phoenix, the temperature already climbing toward another scorching desert day. Their destination was the Tanner Trail, one of the Grand Canyon's most challenging and isolated routes. The Tanner Trail isn't for casual hikers. Originally carved by prospector Seth Tanner in the 1880s, it's a punishing 16-mile round trip that descends 4,800 feet through some of the most exposed terrain in the park. Unlike the popular Bright Angel or South Kaibab trails with their water stations and frequent ranger patrols, the Tanner sees fewer than 100 hikers per year. Much of the route crosses sun-baked rock where no shade exists and no water is available. At 3:45 p.m. on June 8th, the three friends walked into the Backcountry Information Center at Grand Canyon National Park. Ranger Paul Davidson conducted their mandatory safety briefing. With 15 years of experience, Davidson noted in his log that Garrett, Jake, and Meredith clearly fell into the experienced category. Their equipment list read like a wilderness survival manual. GPS devices with extra batteries, satellite communicator for emergency contact, water purification tablets, signal mirror, emergency shelter, comprehensive first aid supplies, and 6 days' worth of food and water carefully calculated based on exertion levels and temperature predictions. Emergency contacts were established. Garrett listed his mother, Carol Moss of Scottsdale. Jake listed his father, William Holloway of Tempe. Meredith listed her sister, Jennifer Quinn of Phoenix. As the sun set on June 8th, the three friends made final preparations at their hotel near the park. They double-checked equipment, reviewed their route one last time, and sent reassuring messages to their families. Everything was normal. Everything was planned. None of them could have imagined that within 3 days they would encounter something in those canyon depths that would change their lives forever and end 2 of them completely. The morning of June 9th dawned clear and hot as the three friends began their descent into what would become one of America's most baffling disappearances. At 6:30 a.m., they shouldered their packs at the Tanner Trailhead. The early start was crucial. Desert hiking demands that you complete the most strenuous portions before the sun reaches its full intensity. By 2 p.m., they had reached the Colorado River. The campsite they established at Tanner Rapids was textbook perfect. They chose a gravel beach well above the high water line, protected from potential flash floods, but close enough to the river for easy water access. That evening, Garrett sent the first of what would be only 2 communications with the outside world. His text to his mother was optimistic. Made it to river. Camp perfect. Jake already photographing sunset. Meredith found some petroglyphs. Amazing place. All good. June 10th began with the kind of sunrise that makes experienced hikers understand why they endure punishing descents. Jake discovered remnants of Seth Tanner's original mining operation, including rusted equipment and stone foundations. Meredith was documenting petroglyphs that appeared far older than any she had studied in her academic work. That evening, at exactly 7:20 p.m., Garrett sent what would be their final communication. Made it to river yesterday. Camp established at Tanner Rapids. Jake found old mining equipment. Incredible history here. Meredith documenting petroglyphs in Side Canyon. Exploring upstream tomorrow to Cardenas Creek confluence. All good. Amazing sunset tonight. The message was transmitted from coordinates 36°6' to 18, north latitude 150 42's west longitude, placing them exactly where they had planned to be. Everything in the text suggested normal conditions, successful exploration, and excitement about the following day's planned activities. Then, silence. June 11th came and went without any communication. For experienced wilderness travelers, this wasn't necessarily alarming. Satellite communicators can be blocked by canyon walls, batteries can fail, and explorers often become so absorbed in their activities that scheduled check-ins are forgotten. June 12th passed the same way. Still no contact. But June 13th was different. June 13th was their scheduled return date. At 5 p.m. on June 13th, when Garrett, Jake, and Meredith should have been hiking out of the canyon and driving back to Phoenix, their families began to worry. By 8 p.m., worry had turned to concern. By midnight, concern had become fear. June 14th dawned with Jake's Ford Explorer still sitting in the Lipen Point parking area, covered with morning dew and giving no sign that its owners had returned. At 9:15 a.m. on June 14th, Carol Moss made the phone call that would trigger one of the largest search operations in Grand Canyon history. Within 90 minutes of Carol Moss's call, the Grand Canyon's emergency response machine was in full motion. Ranger Paul Davidson led the first rapid response team down the upper portion of the Tanner Trail. As someone who had briefed the missing hikers, Davidson understood better than anyone where to focus the initial search efforts. The early signs were encouraging. At the 6-mile marker, searchers found clear boot prints in a sandy wash that matched the tread patterns of the hiking boots Garrett, Jake, and Meredith had been wearing. The prints were heading in the correct direction, consistent with their planned descent to the river. But as the search team continued toward the Colorado River, the trail of evidence simply ended. On June 15th, searchers reached Tanner Rapids and discovered something that would haunt investigators for years to come. The campsite was there. The location was exactly where any experienced hiker would have chosen to establish base camp. A flat gravel beach above the high water line, protected from floods but close to water access. The evidence of occupation was clear. A carefully constructed stone fire ring, rocks arranged to mark tent locations, even a small area where someone had cleared debris to create a comfortable sitting spot. But the campsite was clean. Not just tidy. Clean in a way that seemed almost unnatural. Every piece of equipment was gone. Tents, sleeping bags, cooking gear, food containers, water bottles, everything. Not a single tent stake remained driven into the ground. Not one piece of trash had been left behind. Even small items that campers typically overlook during packing, pieces of torn fabric, bottle caps, food crumbs, were completely absent. Detective Susan Rivera of the Coconino County Sheriff's Office later described it as the most thoroughly cleaned campsite I've ever encountered in 18 years of wilderness investigations. The systematic nature of the cleanup was puzzling. Experienced backpackers typically leave their base camp established while making day trips to explore surrounding areas. They don't pack everything up unless they're permanently leaving an area. And if they had been planning to relocate their camp, they would have left some indication in their final communication. The search of Jake's vehicle provided more questions than answers. The Ford Explorer sat exactly where the three friends had left it, locked and showing no signs of forced entry or disturbance. Inside, investigators found wallets containing cash and credit cards, spare car keys, a detailed topographic map with their route marked in red ink, and a cooler that had once contained ice but was now filled with stale water. The map was particularly intriguing. Beyond the main route they had planned along the Tanner Trail, several areas were marked with question marks and handwritten notes. One notation read, "M's Anthropology Sites," near a cluster of unnamed side canyons. Another marking indicated possible petroglyphs in an area approximately 3 miles from their base camp location. By June 17th, what had begun as a routine search for delayed hikers had expanded into one of the largest search operations in Grand Canyon history. What would you do if your family member missed their check-in during a wilderness trip? Comment below, because understanding the search process might save someone you love. The investigation revealed troubling patterns that extended far beyond this single disappearance. Detective Rivera's research into park records uncovered 11 previous disappearances in the Tanner Trail corridor over the past 50 years, all involving experienced hikers who had planned to explore remote side canyons. The cases shared eerie similarities. In each instance, well-prepared hikers had simply vanished without leaving any trace of their fate. Extensive search operations had found minimal evidence, leading to official conclusions of accidental death due to falls, exposure, or flash floods. But the complete absence of physical evidence was unusual, even for the Grand Canyon. Patricia Reed in 1987, researching pioneer routes. Thomas and Linda Foster in 1994, on a photography expedition. Maria Santos in 2003, conducting an archaeological survey. Robert Kinney in 2011, scouting new climbing routes, all experienced, all well-equipped, all vanished without explanation in the same general area where Garrett, Jake, and Meredith had last been seen. By June 25th, hope was fading that the three friends would be found alive. Desert survival experts agreed that even with careful rationing, their water supplies would have been exhausted by this point. Daytime temperatures in the inner canyon had been consistently above 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and humans cannot survive long in such conditions without adequate hydration. On June 28th, after 18 days of intensive searching, the official operation was suspended. The final search report documented a level of effort rarely seen in national park history. 4,500 personnel hours, 180 helicopter flight hours, coverage of every accessible area within a 15-mile radius of the hikers' last known location. Advanced technology, including ground-penetrating radar and sonar examination of river pools, had revealed nothing. 3 experienced hikers carrying modern communication equipment and following a well-established trail had simply vanished as if they had never existed. The families weren't ready to accept the official explanation. In August 2017, pooling their resources and determination to find answers, they hired private investigator Helen Rodriguez. Rodriguez brought a different perspective to the case. As a former Phoenix police detective with 23 years of experience in missing persons investigations, she approached the disappearance not as a wilderness accident, but as a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit together properly. What she discovered would challenge fundamental assumptions about what was possible in the Grand Canyon. Rodriguez identified a roughly oval zone encompassing about 20 square miles where electronic devices consistently malfunctioned. GPS units that functioned perfectly elsewhere would lose satellite connectivity when carried into this specific area. Cell phones would display no signal even in locations where coverage should have been available. Satellite communicators would fail to connect to networks, experience rapid battery drain, or display impossible position readings. Her investigation into local tribal knowledge proved equally unsettling. Working with cultural liaison officers, she learned that certain areas of the Eastern Canyon had been traditionally avoided by indigenous peoples. Hopi tribal advisors spoke carefully about places where the earth spirits were angry and warned that people who entered these areas without proper spiritual preparation risked being taken to teach respect. These weren't casual superstitions. They were specific geographical warnings passed down through generations of people who had lived in harmony with the canyon landscape for thousands of years. One elder, speaking through a translator and requesting anonymity, described stories of people who had walked into the deep places and walked out changed, if they walked out at all. These weren't recent tales influenced by modern disappearances. They were traditional stories that predated European settlement of the region. Rodriguez's most chilling discovery came through patient analysis of incident reports filed by hikers who had visited the area and returned safely. Multiple hikers reported overwhelming feelings of being watched while in certain side canyons. These weren't vague unease or normal caution that comes with wilderness travel. They were specific, intense sensations of human observation that caused experienced outdoors people to abandon planned routes and retreat to main trails. The Michael Torres incident of September 2020 provided the most concrete evidence. Torres, an experienced canyoneer from Tucson, had been camping alone near Cardenas Creek when he encountered something that would haunt him for years. According to his detailed written report, filed with park rangers 3 days after the incident, Torres had awakened around 2 a.m. to find several figures standing silently at the edge of his campsite. The figures appeared to be wearing traditional Native American clothing, but with modifications that Torres found disturbing. The garments seemed designed for extreme heat and darkness, leather that looked almost blackened, as if treated with substances he couldn't identify. Their faces were painted or tattooed with patterns that didn't match any tribal art he had studied. Most unnervingly, several of the figures appeared to be of European descent, definitely not members of any recognized local tribe. When Torres called out, asking if they needed help or were in distress, the figures retreated into the canyon darkness without making any sound. Not a single footstep, no displaced gravel, no rustling of clothing. They simply melted back into the shadows as if they had never been there. Have you ever felt like you were being watched in a remote place? That instinct might be more important than you think, because what Rodriguez discovered suggested that some of those feelings might be based on something very real. October 15, 2024, started as a routine day at Grand Canyon National Park. That changed at 10:30 a.m. when a figure emerged from the tree line near Bright Angel Lodge. Ranger Michelle Torres assumed she was looking at one of the extreme desert survivors who occasionally turn up at national parks. The man approaching her desk was clearly in distress, wearing tattered clothing that was filthy beyond recognition. But as he got closer, details began to register that made no sense. His hair, though long and matted, showed signs of having been cut with tools. His skin was burned nearly black from sun exposure. Most unnervingly, visible beneath his torn shirt, were intricate scarification patterns that formed geometric designs unlike anything Torres had seen in her 8 years working with diverse park visitors. When the man collapsed at her desk, barely able to stand, Torres immediately called for emergency medical assistance. As she helped him to a shaded bench, he whispered words that made her blood run cold. 7 years, the canyon keepers, they're still down there. Paramedics found a patient unlike anything they had encountered. The man's vital signs indicated chronic adaptation to extreme environmental conditions. His resting heart rate was unusually low, his blood pressure suggested long-term dehydration management, and his core body temperature was several degrees below normal range. At the hospital, when asked his name, the patient replied clearly, Garrett Moss, born January 15, 1991, missing since June 2017. DNA testing confirmed what seemed impossible. The survivor who had walked out of the Grand Canyon wilderness was indeed Garrett Moss, one of 3 college graduates who had vanished without trace 7 years earlier. The news sent shockwaves through law enforcement, the families, and the community of search professionals who had spent 18 days looking for evidence of the missing hikers in 2017. According to Garrett's account, the 3 friends had indeed established base camp at Tanner Rapids on June 9, 2017, exactly as planned. They had spent June 10th exploring and documenting the area, with Jake photographing mining ruins and Meredith studying petroglyphs in nearby side canyons. On June 11th, Meredith had identified what appeared to be an unmarked trail leading into a narrow side canyon where she believed significant archaeological sites might be located. The path was barely visible, marked only by ancient cairns that seemed to have been placed by indigenous peoples centuries earlier. Following this trail, approximately 3 miles into the side canyon, they had encountered what Garrett described as the Canyon Keepers, a group of 12 to 15 individuals who had been observing them from concealment among the rocks. The keepers appeared to be wearing traditional Native American clothing, but with modifications that suggested long-term adaptation to life in the canyon's harshest environments. Their garments were made from desert plants and animal hides, treated with substances that provided protection from extreme heat and sun exposure. Their faces and bodies bore tattoos created with natural pigments that formed patterns unlike any known tribal art. Most disturbing to the 3 college graduates was the realization that several of the keepers appeared to be of European descent, suggesting they weren't members of any recognized indigenous tribe. Garrett described being led deeper into side canyons, along routes that seemed to defy the landscape's apparent geography. The group traveled for days through passages where the rock walls pressed so close together that noon felt like twilight, following paths that were invisible until you were directly on them. Eventually, they reached what Garrett called the Hidden City, a complex of natural caves and carefully carved chambers located in a box canyon that was completely invisible from above. The settlement showed evidence of long-term habitation, with sophisticated water management systems, food storage areas, and living spaces carved directly into the canyon walls. According to his fragmented account, Jake and Meredith had died during escape attempts in the first 2 years of captivity. Jake had fallen while attempting to climb out of the hidden canyon system during a solo breakout attempt. Meredith had become lost in the cave system during her own escape effort and had died of exposure before she could find her way back to inhabited areas. Garrett's eventual escape came after a flash flood in August 2024 had damaged portions of the hidden settlement. During the chaos of flood recovery, Garrett found himself assigned to gather materials from areas closer to the main canyon than he had been allowed to explore in years. His escape began on October 12, 2024. He left the hidden settlement during pre-dawn hours when most of the keepers were sleeping. Following what he hoped was the route they had originally taken into the depths, he climbed through passages and canyons for 3 days without food or water. On October 15th, severely dehydrated and near collapse, Garrett emerged from a narrow slot canyon near Desert View Drive and walked along the rim road until he reached Bright Angel Lodge. A joint task force was assembled to verify Garrett's account and potentially locate the hidden settlement he described. On November 3rd, search teams located human remains in a narrow canyon approximately 4 miles from the Tanner Trail. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bones belonged to Jake Holloway, with evidence suggesting death had occurred several years earlier from injuries consistent with a fall from significant height. 3 days later, additional remains were found in a separate location within the same canyon system. DNA testing confirmed these belonged to Meredith Quinn, with forensic evidence suggesting death from exposure after an extended period of survival in harsh conditions. Near both discovery sites, searchers found artifacts that seemed to support elements of Garrett's account. Stone tools crafted from local materials, fragments of plant fiber textiles woven using traditional techniques, and carved symbols in protected rock alcoves that matched the scarification patterns on Garrett's body. However, the keepers themselves and their hidden settlement proved impossible to locate. Despite extensive searching using ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and experimental sonar mapping techniques, no evidence of permanent underground habitation matching Garrett's descriptions could be found. The investigation's final report, released on February 10, 2025, reached carefully worded conclusions that satisfied no one completely. The report confirmed that Garrett Moss, Jake Holloway, and Meredith Quinn had encountered an unidentified group living in extreme isolation within Grand Canyon National Park. Jake Holloway and Meredith Quinn had died during their encounter with this group, and Garrett Moss had been held in unknown circumstances until his escape in October 2024. However, the report also noted that the group responsible could not be located or identified despite extensive investigation. Garrett Moss continues his rehabilitation in a specialized facility outside Phoenix, slowly readjusting to modern life while struggling with memories and experiences that challenge the boundaries of human understanding. His recovery has been complicated by psychological adaptations that make normal social interaction difficult. He cannot tolerate artificial lighting for extended periods, experiences panic attacks in enclosed spaces without natural light, and shows signs of dependency on the plant-based diet he consumed for 7 years. Most concerning to his treatment team, he frequently expresses desire to return to the canyon, describing it as home in ways that suggest his identity remains partially tied to his experience with the keepers. Carol Moss has become an advocate for families of missing persons, using her platform to highlight the dangers faced by those who venture into America's most remote wilderness areas. Grand Canyon National Park has implemented comprehensive new safety protocols in response to the case. All backcountry permits now require detailed itineraries with mandatory GPS tracking for solo hikers and groups of fewer than 4 people. Rangers have increased patrols in remote eastern sections of the park, and new emergency communication equipment has been installed at strategic locations throughout the wilderness. The case has prompted broader examination of missing persons incidents in America's national parks. A federal task force is now reviewing over 1,600 unsolved disappearances that have occurred in wilderness areas since 1958, looking for patterns that might suggest encounters with isolated groups or communities living beyond the boundaries of normal society. What would you think if it were your family member who vanished into these depths? Comment below and share your thoughts, because understanding these mysteries might be more important than we realize. Tap like if you believe no missing person case should ever be forgotten, and subscribe for more stories that challenge everything we think we know about the world around us. The Grand Canyon keeps its secrets buried deep in stone and shadow, hidden in passages that don't appear on any map. Sometimes, what it finally reveals is more terrifying than what it conceals, because the depths that change us never truly let us go.